Darling, I love you, but be so for real. If the Druski skit makes you uncomfortable in any way, it's not because God is being mocked. It's not because it's a sin. It's because power structures are being exposed, and that exposure can feel threatening to a sense of self. Like, subscribe, follow to I Love You But Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, all the places, I'm there. But back into what I was talking about with Druski's skit, people are saying, like, Druski is playing with God. They're saying that, like, reading some tweets, like, folks are unfollowing Druski for actually talking about God in a disrespectful way. People are saying, you don't make jokes about God. It shows just how disrespectful and ungrateful you are. He is our creator, and you ought to put his name, you ought to revere him and not derode him. I just feel sad for the dude or whatever his name is called. Okay. People are saying the church Druski skit was not funny at all. He may be talking about the preachers, but to me, that's also mocking God. So, he will be dealt with for that. He will be dealt with. Okay. Like, also, I want to point out, like, if you're mocking the preachers, how is that also mocking God? Are the preachers God in your head? I just want to make that clear. Like, if you come on here and you mock me, does that mean you're mocking my mom? If you were like, India, you're so this, you're so that, like, how does that apply to my mom? I just want to know. So then, what I can say is, like, why are people saying this skit is mocking God? Because there's a reason. And I understand why someone may get confused. God is sacred. The church should be protected. There are churches that bring so much good to their communities that, like, people who pray over their members, people who will go to somebody's side as they're having their last moments in life. And, like, even me growing up, my parents gave me the opportunity once I was, like, of age, like 12 or something, to decide, like, what churches or what my relationship with God would look like. And I went to a church as a teen when I felt I was a little bit lost, trying to find myself like every teenager is. And I really do feel and credit the church with deepening my relationship to God and to Jesus in a time when I need it. So, and church has played a critical role in the survival of Black people in the United States. It's not symbolically, it's a literal role of survival. I actually have this book that I haven't finished reading called God of the Oppressed. And for a long time, for a long time, the church wasn't just where we worshiped as Black people or colored people, whatever you want to call it. It was the only place we had to feel safe. When Black people were denied land, education, like it was illegal for Black people to learn how to read, political power, all of the above, the church became a space that we controlled and a space where we could gather without having to ask permission or hide the fact that we were learning how to read. They were the places where Black people, colored people learned how to read because they were schools. They taught people how to write, how to organize. The church played a pivotal role in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King wasn't a leader. He was a preacher, pastor, whatever you call it. And the pulpit became a very large scale platform because it was trusted, because it was coming from someone who led a church. People could get behind it and organize. And then even not just like during these logistical things, but from an emotional survival perspective, especially during slavery, Jim Crow era, lynchings, actual terror that any small perceived mistake may be the end of you. Church was a way for you to still have faith and maybe even a naive optimism. It was an armor that we used to still wake up in the morning and not want to unalive ourselves. The church has helped oppressed people over time historically make sense of a world, and it still does today, that is actively trying to break you. So I respect that. But we still have to be for real in this good old year of 2026. The church earned that trust in us of the oppressed, but it also holds so much authority now because it earned that trust that it becomes the best place to manipulate people and hide in plain sight. The best place for that because of that trust, because of its very big, huge part in the survival of oppressed people in America. So that's why the critique feels like a betrayal to so many people. Because if the church once saved you or your ancestors, the idea that something that very literally saved you, brought you through your darkest times, is also the thing that could be manipulating or betraying or stealing money from you feels very hard to sit with. There's a term for it called cognitive dissonance, I think is the term. Shout out to my psychology minor. Love that for me. But it's a real thing that happens. Like, you're being pit against two ideas of like two things that are true. And I really want to reach out my hand, and I'm going to hold yours through the screen while I say this, and we're going to cross this bridge together. If you too felt like uncomfortable watching Druski skit. Mocking men who use God to control people is not mocking God. It's refusing to let God be used as a shield to abuse people. Okay. I just had to say that. Satire isn't exposing the faith or God, it's exposing the power that we've given to man. And if that makes you uncomfortable, it's because something unholy, unfaithful, cynical even, is being seen. The devil, the devil is always in the details. And I would know that. I just went through some stuff. I ended an engagement and I decided it was the devil in the details that I didn't even know. Someone had this tweet that said, mocking God through megachurch jokes might get a quick laugh, but it missed something deeper. For a lot of people, faith isn't a punchline. It's where they found hope when life collapsed, where they learned forgiveness, humility, and responsibility. You can critique institutions or hypocrisy without belief itself into a joke. When we blur that line, we're not being clever, we're being careless. However, I don't really understand what line was blurred. Like, I understand, I just held your hand, and I really understand if you were offended. Why? Because something, that cognitive dissonance. However, I don't think this missed the mark at all. In order to really help people see the light, you have to make it uncomfortable Or else you're going to be preaching, no pun intended, to the choir. You're going to be preaching to people who already understand that just to have faith, just to believe in God, you don't have to get exploited by these megachurch leaders. So if you don't make certain people who are still within those systems, still being exploited, feel just a little bit uncomfortable, you're not really making effective change. You're just making a joke that's going to hit for the people that it hits. So cult psychology, I want to get more into that. I love to use my minor. I love to think that my degree meant something and that the loans I'm paying off matter. So we're going to do it. So people who say that Druski is playing with God, no disrespect, are the reason that cults still exist. Charismatic leaders, like let's think about like what we always think about when we think of cults. Charismatic leaders. Financial pressure.
Ushers,
close the doors. I'm not closing the doors until I get another $1,000. Like there was that video on Twitter going around of the pastor literally telling people to close the doors until he got more money in the tithe. Spiritual fear. Fear that if I don't participate in this, if I don't do this, I'm going to go to hell. This bad thing is going to happen to me. I'm not going to, the people trying to take over my life, the people trying to control me are going to be able to control me if I don't participate in this movement. And then isolation, if you get outside critique, like the woman, I forget these people's names, but the pastor's wife that wore that skin tight dress, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, she should have never worn that. She's a preacher's wife, da 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 da. Like that outside critique and saying, if you are in this institution, you can only dress like this or you can only do these types of things. Do that not sound like the C word? Cult? I don't know. You tell me, but I feel like that's what that sounds like. And then, why do people defend these manipulative leaders when they're wearing their Christian Dior and their Louboutins at church while I'm like living check to check, making sure that I have enough money to give to the tithe? Why would people defend them? Well, like I said, it's cognitive dissonance. And if this isn't it, then like, what is? Like, I already gave my last check. So if I really gave my last check or my last dollar and I find out that it wasn't worth it, this wasn't like actually real moving faith, something I did, that hurts. And I'd rather believe that I've been making the right decisions over the past year, over the past month, over the past few days, than to face the fact that I got. Right? You're also protecting your identity. If this church, this group of people, if this belief is not my identity, then who am I? That's a tough question. Like, you know how we all have like identity crises here and there. I've had my quarter life crisis. What a time. I'm sure I'll have a midlife crisis. We all have identity crises, right? And something tied to your faith, to your core of like what you believe is right and wrong, having that challenge, it can't be easy. So it's that fear of being wrong and being betrayed in your wrongness. So I'm going to break this down for you. Even though it's something that I can resonate with and understand why people might be offended, silence means, and not speaking on it because we're scared to offend someone who's deep in that church, means there's safety for abusers. My phrase of the year is Silence is compliance. Silence is compliance. And it's no coincidence that I'm recording this on MLK Day. And like people, the phrases and the terms that we all associate with Martin Luther King they're not silence, but they push those narratives of like, oh, we're not fighting, we're peaceful, we're this. But silence is just as much violence as anything else, because it allows for people to keep doing what they're doing without accountability, and that is dangerous. We need to speak up. We need to make our satire. Whatever way that you speak up, or whatever way that you feel comfortable shedding light on anything that people normally are silent about, even if it's your own personal experience, is worth it. Now, what is the difference between like mocking God and mocking manipulation? Because those are two different things. And this is where we have to talk about comedy and its purpose beyond entertainment. Because yes, comedy is entertainment. Ha ha ha, we pay to go to a comedy show, watch Netflix comedy specials, whatever the case may be, but it's more than just that. Comedy always has a specific job in society. It says the things that people are too afraid to say, too polite to say, too conditioned to say out loud. It lowers people's defenses just enough for the truth to get through. Just enough, right? Satire exaggerates what already exists so we can actually see it, so we can see the light. And when something has been normalized for so long that people stop questioning it, comedy forces us to look again. That's why when people get mad, when jokes turn on people at the top, or like touch on power structures that they don't want to have exposed, and authority they don't want to have exposed, they say the comedy is now all of a sudden inappropriate. The Druski skit, as an example, is mocking the performance the megachurches put on to manipulate people. The theatrics, the way that power disguises itself as divine authority. Also, this is not a new concept on comedy or something that Druski created. Comedians like Dave Chappelle have always made people uncomfortable because they refuse to protect illusions. Dave Chappelle walked away from millions because he refused to not shed light on truths that he thought were important. Comedy only becomes controversial when it forces reflection instead of reassuring the status quo of what's going on. And to bring it back to God specifically, God don't get his feelings hurt. If it's real faith and real devotion or whatever, why would it need protection from a jokey joke? Why would the jokey joke matter so much if we're talking about God, like the person who put us on this earth? Institutions built on silence and fear absolutely need protection from jokes, because then we could dismantle them when people see the light. But God, what do God need protection from? Okay? So no, I don't think that Druski is mocking God, and I think that comedy has a role to disrupt silence. Comedy has a role to disrupt silence, or at that point, what would be the point of comedy? If the joke, any joke, hits too close to home, it's because something is being exposed. And the devil hates being exposed. He hates it. He is the OG narcissist, okay? Now, since I'm talking about the devil and mocking God, megachurches. I'm going to bring in some biblical scriptures into this conversation because I just am. Now, the Bible talks about the devil in the details and the devil in disguise for a reason. Manipulation rarely shows up looking evil. Champ. Settle. Manipulation. Oh shit, that's not what I even wanted to say. You're gonna have a fun time editing all this out because of this bad dog. Sorry, girl. Very sorry. I hope that I'm a little bit entertaining though in the meantime. So, manipulation rarely shows up looking like it's evil. It shows up looking respectable and polished and convincing. Anybody ever had a narcissist boyfriend? I feel like you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. 2 Corinthians tells us that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. That means deception often looks righteous on the surface. I would know. There are constant warnings. Champ. Second Corinthians tells us plainly that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. That means that deception often looks righteous on the surface. I would know. I sure would. There are constant warnings about false prophets, not obvious villains, but leaders who appear godly when exploiting people. Jesus says in Matthew 7, watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, Dior, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. The warning isn't about outsiders or obvious sinners of like people like, okay, you steal, you robbed, whatever, like non-believers. It's about people who are on the inside of religious spaces. And what does scripture emphasize instead of blind loyalty? Discernment. Ding, 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 ding. First, John tells believers to test the spirits, not accept everything just because it sounds spiritual. Discernment. I feel like I should make like a rainbow. Discernment means paying attention to fruit, behavior, and impact, not just the words that are coming out their mouth. Now let's talk about Jesus fucking Christ and what he would be doing. Because Jesus was not out here protecting institutions for the sake of protecting them. In all 4 Gospels, we see Jesus enter the temple and flip tables when he's like, why are y'all selling stuff here? This is supposed to be a place of worship. You got a market in here? Fuckers. Stop fucking playing with God. He don't negotiate with them. He don't soften his message. He literally disrupts the system by flipping tables. Violence is sometimes the answer. Why? Because religious leaders turned sacred spaces and continue to turn them into marketplaces. It's one church online talking about they going to start selling the devil's lettuce there. I don't know if I could say that word on YouTube. The one that started with a W, the devil's lettuce. They were exploiting people financially in the name of God back at the time of Jesus, and they doing it now. Jesus said, "You have made my Father's house a den of thieves." That matters because we need to be directing our anger at the sinners, not at Druski, not at the people who are exposing this authority. He was flipping tables in that motherfucker, and it was not a peaceful protest. Scripture does ask people to make their own discernment and not rely on charismatic leaders. It tells people to stay woke, they be creeping, to notice when righteousness is a performance and not an actual practice. Okay? Satire, Druski, does not mock God. It exposes what is trying to hide behind in the name of God, just like Jesus was doing when he was flipping them tables. Because remember what we said our phrase of the year is? Silence is compliance. So, when comedy highlights these theatrics, gives us a little kiki ha-ha, it's echoing the warnings of the scriptures itself. It is the definition of doing the Lord's work. How about that? Okay, now, we already talked about the role of comedy in society and wanted to talk about like a couple big examples of this. Dave Chappelle, we kind of spoke on, and he always has provoked backlash across his career. I don't know if everyone's seen the Unstoppable Netflix comedy special, but he said some of the realest things that you would think, like, oh my gosh, Netflix really did pay him to get on here and say these things, and they let it be there. And they did. And you could even hear in the crowd's reactions of, like, some of the things hit a little too close. And they was a little booing, a little awe, a little whatever. But guess what? He kept going, and he did his special. And I think it was so impactful to see someone, especially someone who is Black, being able to speak about things and get paid for it and make people laugh. And then before Dave Chappelle, there was George Carlin. He exposed religious hypocrisy, political propaganda, consumerism, and how institutions use polite language to control people. Think about woke culture. Think about, oh, well, we have to say this and not that, and this and not that. And he demanded that there be accountability from these systems and institutions instead of protection, just like Druski did in his skit. Every time comedy exposes a power, people say it's disrespectful. They said it about Carlin, about Richard Pryor, about Dave Chappelle, and they're saying it now about Druski. But overwhelmingly more people are agreeing than before. And over time, I have to believe in my pretty little brain that more and more people will see the light. So, the questions I want to leave you with are, who is protected when we can't laugh? Champ. Too rough. Too rough. So I want to leave you all with these questions. Who is protected when we can't laugh at something? Who is harmed when leaders are above critique? What does real faith require? Is it silence or is it discernment? God doesn't need protection. People do. Thank you. Thank you to all the great comedians who work to keep us safe through satire and uncomfortable laughter. That's fucking it.